Thank you. And I personally, talking about the bonus point, I think this event is a big bonus for me because I made so many great connections by making this event happen. And just for you to know the background, these events in IABC, the Leadership Institute, are usually only for the members, and they are meant for discussing on how are we going to develop the organization, doing the yearly planning and so on. So I'm really glad that this time, and that was actually my personal ambition to do it a little bit more open, because I work with these guys quite often and I meet them in the conferences, but it's not every time that I hear their experiences of their knowledge that they gather. So I think this is the biggest value in terms of reading the ideas. And the next speaker that I'm going to introduce is also a person who I would like to ask so many questions about his experiences, because he's not only living in Dubai, working at P&G, he is also a top innovator in the Middle East. He's named the top innovator in the Middle East. He is also Cannes Lion judge for PR category, the recent ones that were just happening this year, and so many, many more. Effie judge I just recently read. So I want to welcome Alex Malouf here on the stage.
First of all, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. It's my first time in Vilnius, and it's taken me a couple of flights to get over here. Unfortunately, we don't have any routes between Vilnius and Dubai, which we've already got to sort out. We need to push out the G-Spot campaign to Dubai. We'll see what the response is. I'll get kicked out of the country very quickly, but still. So I want to talk about the issue of influence, because we are all doing influencer marketing. Who here is working on influencer marketing? Who here works with influencers? Who is an influencer here? Okay, raise your hands. Everybody's an influencer. My top influencer is my wife, okay? She tells me to do something, I do it. And she only has about 300 followers online, okay? But I want to talk to you about the concept, the notion, and bring a little bit of psychology in. So change the way we perceive influence, okay? And actually with that, if you are online on social media, you can also find us on IBC EME. So if you want to ask questions, you can also ask questions there. So let's begin. Now, let's look at the notion of influence and what it means, for example, for where I work in a B2C environment. So let's define it before we start changing it. So these two people are very well known. Al and Laura Rees, they are essentially pioneers in the marketing space, and this is how they look at essentially what influence means. And by the way, this isn't a new notion. The concept of influence has been around for a long time. So just to read it out, it's really about what others say about your brand and it being much more impactful than what we say about our own brands, which is obvious to all of us here. Now, then how do we define influencer marketing? And this is what we do internally. This is what we say. It's about how we leverage these influencers, okay, in terms of connecting with a wider audience and then them telling that story about us to build up brands, build up organizations, essentially build up reputation. Now, why do I say influence? The concept isn't new, because there are many different ways we influence others. Have a look at this. You know, you have celebrities, so which we could probably redefine today as social media influencers. We also have celebrities as well, obviously. We have reviews. One of the most impactful ways of building up a brand or product online is actually through the reviews on Amazon and other e-commerce websites. You have subject experts. You have bloggers, family and friends the media. So the media, again, still plays a role. Now, I want to quote from this survey. Anybody know this survey? Anybody heard of Edelman, the trust barometer which they run? So this is research from Edelman. This is from last year. And this is, to me, fascinating. It really redefines how or who influences. Now, if you look at these numbers, who is the top influencer there? Tell me. Friends and family. Okay? Again, it's obvious. But it's not something we often practice as a profession. You go next, academic expert. Third, other companies as well. What's interesting is the company CEO is right in the middle. And again, you move further down, online personalities. Celebrities are actually at the end. But again, it tells you a lot in terms of who is powerful when it comes to influence. Because it's not just simply the message, it's the messenger. This is what we're talking about here. Now, what do influencers do? And this is something else we need to think about. What are we looking to do through influencers? Are we looking to essentially change people's perceptions, so their views, their attitudes? Or are we actually looking to do more than that? We're actually looking to change behaviors. So, for example, my company, we're looking at purchase intent. How can we make people buy our products? And how do we use influencers to do that? So this is a great look at the psychology behind influencers and also the impact as well. And we'll go a little bit deeper into the psychology piece in a moment. Now, another piece, which one I want to quickly look at before we go into the psychology and the influence drivers, is the influencer content. So the notion of what is good influencer marketing. Now, there are 4 elements here. Really simple. I'm not going into too much detail. But first of all, look at the story. What is the story that the influencer is sharing? What is the narrative here? Is there a strong narrative? Is it logical, first of all? Second, the data points. What data points do you have within that narrative? And this really can go for any content, but I want to talk about it in the context of influencer marketing. Third element, the design, and this is becoming increasingly important, especially with video, because in today's world, people are consuming more and more video, especially short-form video content. And the final piece, which plays into all the 3 elements, how shareable is the content which people are putting out, your influencers, on your behalf. And it may not just be celebrities, it may not be social media influencers, it could even be your employees as well. It could be others within your circle who you want to work with in terms of furthering your reputational goals. Now, let's talk about what we need to look at or look for in terms of influencers. So, one of the people that we often reference in my company is a gentleman called Robert Cialdini. He's a professor from Texas, and he's written for over 30 years on the issue of psychology, particularly persuasion. He's worked on presidential campaigns, he worked with President Obama and others, and he has drawn up essentially 6 drivers of influence. So let me talk you through those. First, again, a simple notion, authority. We listen to people who are experts. So why do you think, say, healthcare brands, say, soap brands, use people who look like doctors in advertising? Because they are experts. You know, I know some of us go to Google for medical advice. Hopefully, not that many. We defer to expertise, okay? Second, likability. It's a really, really simple notion. If you like someone, what are you more likely to do when they ask you for something? you're more likely to say yes to them. In a way, it's actually somebody who's often like you. The more they are like you, the more that you engage with them, the more you like their viewpoints, the more likely it is you will do what they say, or you will agree with their opinion. Third element, social proof. Now, I'll give you a choice. There's 2 restaurants in the street. One is full, and when I mean full, it's full. There's not a table to be seen. One is empty. Which one do you want to go to? Again, social proof. We follow others. And this is where the issue of numbers comes into play. Actually, for an Instagram or somebody else online, it's easier to go from 100,000 to 1 million followers than it is from 1 to 100,000. Fourth element, scarcity. And I love this one, especially when I go into a store and I see the words limited edition on a piece of merchandise. Is there anything in this world which is unlimited? No. So why do we write limited edition? Again, it's because we want more, an item of which there is less of. So if it's exclusive, if it's unique, we're attracted to it. It's basic psychology. Now, this is really interesting when it comes to influencers. Not just subject experts, but people who, often when you find, when you're looking at specific areas, and there's very few bloggers, there's very few people who work in that area, we want to know from them because there are so few of them. Now, reciprocity. This is an interesting one when it comes to engagement. So again, I'll go back to the person that you like, that you say yes to. There's another psychological aspect to this. It's almost like, a bank account. When you put credits in, you can then debit out later on. Okay, so when somebody asks you to do a favor and they come back and they say thank you, and you do the same, you almost feel indebted to one another. And this is where you see engagement playing a real pull factor with an audience. We want to engage with influencers, the people that we follow. So, for example, when a celebrity responds to your tweet, what do? You push it out there, you pin it, you make a point about it. Because of this, because we repay in kind. Now, the final aspect is consistency. Now, this is very important when it comes to opinions and views. We value consistency. We don't value those who change their opinions, who flip-flop. When somebody is consistent, we know what they're going to be saying next. Okay? We can see where they're going to be headed. And this is a great help when it comes to us shaping our own opinions. So, they are the 6 influence drivers. But I want to move on to something else. I have a video which is around 7 minutes long, but it's of Robert Cialdini himself. Obviously, I could not bring him here. He hasn't paid me back yet in being reciprocal in terms of his meaning to me and his influence. But let's play this, and I hope you enjoy it.
The power of persuasion and how there are ways to influence the thinking of potential consumers. Paul Salmon brings us his latest Making Sense, which airs Thursdays.
I've heard it said that the most valuable thing in today's world, post-industrial world, is the human being's attention and how to get it. Is that true?
I believe that. Psychology professor Robert Cialdini, marketing maven, art enthusiast, palm reader.
I used to be a palm reader, and I learned the trick that they use to make people say they're right almost always.
So what was the trick?
In the 80s, Cialdini wrote an attention-getting classic, Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion, intended to arm consumers against manipulative marketers. But those who made the book famous were the persuaders themselves, who make a living beckoning us every step we take.
Those ads, those signs, that's old school persuasion, directing people's minds to the content.
In recent years, however, Cialdini has made a new discovery about how to spin friends and influence people.
What I'm talking about is pre-suasion, directing their minds to the moment before they experience the content.
Yes, Pre-suasion, the title of his new book.
Pre-suasion is the practice of getting people sympathetic to your message before they experience it.
Before they even hear it, you mean?
It is what you say immediately before you deliver your message that leverages your success tremendously.
Or if you are the messagee, that plays you like a puppet.
The best salesman I ever saw told people, I left something in the car. Can I get your key to let myself back in? I have an acquaintance who claims he got 3 great jobs by saying something before he began the job interview in each instance. And I have a friend who's a consultant who says he never gets pushback on the price he offers for his services if he says one thing first.
And Pre-suasion demonstrably works, as we'll try to demonstrate throughout this story, by prepping the mind for the message subliminally.
There's this interesting study. A guy goes to a shopping mall in France, and he tries to get women's phone numbers as they pass various shops so he could call for a date. One of them is a shoe store, and another was a bakery. But in neither of those cases was he very successful. He only got a number 13% of the time. But there was one kind of shop that doubled his success rate when women were passing it, a flower shop. Why? Because flowers put women in the mindset of romance.
Not consciously, persuasively, by exploiting a rule of thumb passed down to us by evolution.
If we are paying attention to something, it's important. That's how we decide to pay attention. But a communicator can reroute our attention to something that isn't important, but make it seem important as a consequence.
As a consequence of the very fact that we're subconsciously paying attention to it.
There's a study that shows that people who were asked their political opinions when there was a picture of the American flag in the corner of the questionnaire reported more favorable attitudes toward Republican Party positions because the flag is typically associated in people's minds with a Republican belief set.
As are churches, and studies show that persuasive cues can subconsciously affect actual voting.
If people vote at a polling place inside a church, they vote more Republican. If they vote at a polling place inside a school, they vote more Democrat.
Now, marketers, or at least some of them, have studied persuasion's potency. One online furniture store tested images of fluffy clouds versus cold hard cash on its homepage.
Those who saw the background depiction of clouds searched the site for more comfortable furniture. Those who went to the site that had money in the background became cost conscious and preferred to purchase less expensive furniture.
But isn't it obvious that our consciousness is being affected by what, our perceptive apparatus?
Almost no one recognizes that the clouds or the coins had any impact on their behavior, and yet it did at significant levels. It's the cue that drives you in the direction of what seems more important now because you're focused on it.
Which is why we flashed the thinker at the top of this story, to persuade you to ponder the puzzles we posed at the outset, but never answered. What was the trick of the salesman, the job seeker, the pricey consultant?
In each instance, they did something first.
Starting with the salesman who claimed he'd forgotten something in his car.
He created a sense of trust, because who do you let back into your house by giving them your key except someone you trust?
And that made people more likely to buy what he was selling?
Yes, because he had created a mindset in them that they were dealing with a trustworthy character.
And the guy who got the jobs?
Before every interview, he asked the interviewers, why did you bring me in today? What was it about my qualifications that made you attracted to my candidacy?
And what does that do?
It caused people to start focusing on the positive aspects of his case before they even began discussing it.
And the consultant who never got pushed back on his fees?
He would show prospects his proposal and his $75,000 fee, and he would say, as you can tell, I won't be able to charge you $1 million for this.
And what does that do?
Compared to $1 million, $75,000 now seems trivial.
And why did Cialdini urge us to lead this story with puzzles?
One way to get persuasive attention to your case is to begin with a mystery story. Mysteries cause people to want to understand, to get closure, which cause them, I hope, to want to stay with the programming and listen till the end.
So read my palm.
Yeah. Paul, I can see that you're a stubborn man.
I'm somewhat stubborn.
What I've done is to send you down a memory track where you would encounter times when you were stubborn, and you would look at me and say, that's right.
And that's the whole deal?
No. Suppose I looked at your palm and saw the same thing but said, you're a very flexible man. Now I've sent you down a memory track where you would encounter times when you were flexible, and you would say to me, that's right, that's who I am.
Well, it might not be quite that histrionic, but I think I would say, yeah, flexible.
And I've even done that with a person at a party. Read his palm, told him he was stubborn at the beginning, told him that he was a flexible guy at the end, and he said, you're right, both times.
But hey, Making Sense is supposed to be the NewsHour's weekly economics segment.
So economics, as it's taught and practiced, is based on the notion of rational maximization.
Correct.
This is not rational maximization.
No. What new psychology suggests, it's the factor that is top of consciousness at the moment before you make that economic decision that will win the day.
And so, from Midtown Manhattan, reporting stubbornly yet flexibly, this is economics correspondent Paul Salman.
Now we know.
There you go. Now you know about influence and persuasion. So that's all from me on this one. I'll let you ponder a couple of questions from persuasion afterwards, how you do it and how it fits into influence. So if anybody has any questions, I am here. You can ask them now, you can ask them later on. But thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. I think we have some questions, right? I'll just repeat the question just for the audience, because Alex mentioned that his best influence is the wife, is his wife. Is it because it's mostly women?
Streamed, so I need to make sure that if she is watching, I'm saying the right thing. So I'm persuading here in terms of me coming back and me having an open door to come through. You know, what I find really fascinating is and I think a lot of companies face it, when we look at the concept of influencers, we think of social media, we think of celebrities. But I've never been influenced by somebody I follow online in terms of, you know, buying a cake or buying a bag or buying a car. And it, you know, again, if my wife calls me up, my mother-in-law calls me up, my 3-year-old, you know, says I want something, you know, to me they're my influencers. So I think it's interesting to think how we choose the people that we do, and then also how we prep them for success in terms of persuading or even persuading a wider audience. So I think we need to do a lot more work in terms of getting this right and linking it back to psychology, because it really all is about psychology. You know, who we listen to and why we listen to them.
Any more questions? I have a question, actually. In Lithuania, a word influencer has a kind of negative connotation because it's usually talking about the celebrity part, like influencers on social media. For example. There's more. And my question for you, coming from your region, how is it perceived in Gulf, and how do people look, how is influencer marketing used in Gulf region?
The social media piece in the Gulf is massive. If you look, say, in a market like Saudi or the UAE or Kuwait as well, Kuwait was really the first market in the Middle East and even in Europe where people were charging significant sums of money. I know influencers there who will charge maybe $20,000 a post on Instagram. So big amounts of money. And what is fascinating is a lot of attention and a lot of budgets are being pushed towards influencer marketing. But the challenge is, it's almost like a craze. Again, the challenge is, one, are we spending the right way? Are we seeing an ROI? And how are we measuring what we're doing here? Are we basically doing it just to be seen to be doing it so we can report back, report to our bosses, we're working with this person, they have 2 million followers, we had this many likes, this many engagements, or is there a deeper intention behind it? And I think the industry has a lot to do here in terms of working this out. Maybe you saw the recent example from the UK with a lady who was working with a mouthwash brand. She was lying on the bed, everything was perfectly made. She had sort of the pancakes or tortillas or whatever they were. She had the coffee. And again, big money was spent on the campaign, but what impact did it have? People did not respond in the way, obviously, the brand or the influencer intended them to respond. So a lot of focus and a lot of money is being spent here, but what is the outcome? Are we influencing in the right way? Are we getting people to change their attitudes and behaviors? Or are we actually having a negative reaction in terms of what we're doing?
I guess it's actually all across measurement to get it right. And we do have some cases where lots of money is spent on influencer marketing, but it doesn't really sound right. And probably, some of the, you can even find the other influencers making fun of those. So it's quite an interesting case as well. Thank you very much, Alex. Any more? If you have any more questions, Alex is going to be around. There's more question. Maybe I'll give you
Thank you very much for your presentation. My question is about the results of Edelman Trust Barometer that you showed. Our family, friends are the most influential on us. So what's your opinion on involving friends and family in employee engagement and communication within organization?
That's a really interesting question. We actually did a podcast on this last week with a company in the Middle East, Siemens Middle East, and they've done an 18-month exercise engaging their own employee workforce. They engaged up to 200 of their employees. Give me your details later on. I'll send you the podcast. Have a listen. We've also found that dark social plays a big role in terms of engaging friends and family. So WhatsApp, Telegram. And this is fascinating because, one, we obviously can't measure, so we don't know what the impact is. But if you look at the usage rates, for example, in the Middle East, especially in the Gulf, WhatsApp is the most used channel of communication between friends and family. It's used by 90% of the audience that we deal with. And it's people sharing jokes, but also people asking for opinions, asking for views, they're sharing their experiences. And I am seeing some companies adapting towards this. So, for example, sharing or creating content specifically for dark social, but still it's not something many of us are considering yet. I'll give you another example. In the Gulf, it's a fairly conservative society, hence we haven't heard much about the G-Spot campaign. But what we did learn as a company, we dealt a great deal with retailers in the makeup segment, because some of the brands that we've had, and we'd actually find that female customers were going, and they would ask for the mobile number of the beauticians because they wanted to talk to the beauticians one-to-one. And so essentially the beauticians became influencers. what the customers would do, they would send to the beauticians, and they're all female, customers are female, beauticians are female, again, because of conservative nature. They would send to the beauticians pictures of their outfits to be wearing for the wedding or for the social occasion, and they would say to the beauticians, again, one-to-one, what makeup should I wear with this? What would work with this? And this was entirely organic. This was not something that any of the companies working in that segment, in that region, had foreseen. So again, it's interesting how many of these connections are being made naturally without us even seeing them. So again, it's also a good lesson for us to look beyond just our four walls, to see what our consumers, what our customers are doing, and again, how we can make use of those communication channels and how people are communicating in terms of building up influencers. Because then we started to work with these beauticians, you know, giving them insights, giving them content which they could then share with their customers. So there's a lot we can do here, but it's stepping away from that mindset of let's go for somebody big, let's go for somebody who has numbers, who's a celebrity, and let's try and do things a little bit more impactful, which will have, I think, a greater return on investment where we can measure. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. One more question? Stuart?
Hi, Alex. I really enjoyed that. Thank you. I'm really interested in your view on brands themselves adopting the role of influencer, so being the influencer rather than simply influencing the influencer. So 2 examples that come to my mind right now where brands are trying to, as it were, be authorities or have a stand. So the recent Nike advert with the... Yeah, so that's really interesting because, of course, it puts off as many people in the States as it brings on, but globally I'm sure it goes down very well. And I'm just interested because Nike themselves are saying, we are the influencer here. We're the ones with the point of view. Follow us or don't follow us, which I think is very powerful. And the other one that I'm thinking about in your sector is something like Dove, where they went for different shaped women. They made themselves a kind of influencer to say, we're going to change opinion on what does beauty look like. So, which is, again, quite a brave thing to do, but worked for them, I think. So I'm just wondering how brave brands need to be, how much brands should now themselves be the guys who are the influencers.
What we're seeing is consumers effectively wanting brands to take a position, either for and against. And I saw that very clearly when I was judging at Cannes. The best work was done by brands who were taking an ethical stance on an issue. For example, I'll talk about P&G. There is the Talk campaign, which looked at the issue of racism in the US, and obviously in the context of Black Lives Matter and other movements. And you know, look, it's a Marmite effect. You know, it can put off many people, but also with others, it will bring them on side because people want brands to stand for something. It's not simply about selling a product, because everything today is commoditized. There was another campaign which was from Germany, from the Edeka supermarket chain, which looked at the issue of migration. Brilliant campaign. They basically took one of their stores, they emptied the store of all products which did not come from Germany for one day, and there literally was nothing on the shelf. And you had consumers coming in saying, but where is my chocolate? You know, and the shop attendee saying, but it's not German. Mm-hmm. And they're saying, but you know, we don't care. And then them making a wider point about society. And it was a massive success. Brands need to be brave. They need to state what they do stand for. And also as well, they need to look long-term. It can't just be flip-flopping, as I was saying before, about consistency. They need to have a position which they build upon over the long term. They build their proof points, and they say, this is what we've always believed in, and this is what we will continue to believe in because we believe it is right for us and also for the consumers who believe in us. So I would hope more brands would be braver, because not enough are, but I think that will change going forward, because consumers, especially in today's age, they want some type of leadership, which they're not seeing from other traditional leaders, so to speak.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Alex. And yeah, let's give him a round of applause. And Alex did indeed mention an important thing. If you would like to know more about different topics in comms, IABC EMENA.com has some great free resources, not only for the members. Members do get even more resources, so you can go check out and see the webinars and the podcasts that we're doing as well.